Beep, 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 beep. Hello, how you doing? We're back. Hey, welcome to the Court of the Jesterite. Right, if you want to become a warrior teacher, please let me know, okay? Lots going on, I hope. Starting in January. Subscribe, save, do the usual. Not save, share, do the usual. Become a Jesterite. Yay! Come and join us. Jesterite, it's only £3 a month. And you get them all up front, all the videos, all at once. So as I do them, you get them. And then they're lined up for the rest of the public. So come be a Jesterite. Join the good peeps, right? So I've got an article for you today from Spiked Online by the ever trustworthy and ever wonderful Joe Bartosh, right? For those of you who haven't come across Joe, hell of a writer, can bang them out like nobody else I know, right? So that's our Joe. Okay, so here we go. What is Joe talking about today? Well, today in Spiked Online, with the links for you as usual in the Duber, is the myth behind Transgender Day of Remembrance. The dangers faced by trans people are being widely exaggerated to promote a dangerous ideology, says Joe. As the season of goodwill approaches, humbug, spare a thought for the group that considers itself the most vulnerable in the UK. No, I'm not talking about the poor, sick or homeless, right? I'm talking about trans people who occasionally might have to deal with funny looks, being misgendered, or one hell of a bollock rub when wearing tights designed for women. Joe, say it like it is. Say it like it is. Thankfully for them, this week has been designated as Transgender Awareness Week, as if anybody's not aware. And it's one of the highlights of the corporate calendar. Starting in mid-November each year, an entire 7 days is now dedicated to highlighting the struggles of cross-dressing whingers in wigs. I have to read that again, I'm very sorry. Starting in mid-November each year, an entire 7 days is now dedicated to highlighting the struggles of cross-dressing whingers in wigs. You might have noticed that. On the carousel of grievance, trans-themed events seem to come round with dizzying speed, from Trans Day of Visibility in March to Pronoun Day last month. Although trans people claim to be a marginalised minority, their events are supported by a marketing machine and infrastructure of powerful international agencies. Bodies like the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association, the ILGA, and Joe has provided useful links if you wish to follow up on any of this, and even the United Nations have come out in support of Transgender Awareness Week. There's one. There's another. Have you seen any today? No. Try harder. Over there. Right. Although it's an American import, it is now gaining traction across the UK. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, a man who fancies himself as the capital's conscience, marked the start of Transgender Awareness Week on Monday with a social media post declaring that transphobia and hate crimes have no place in our city. Khan also announced City Hall's commitment to stand in support and solidarity with London's trans and gender non-conforming communities. It just makes you want to puke, doesn't it? Predictably, universities such as the University of Sussex have also championed Transgender Awareness Week, as have once august institutions like the Victoria and Albert Museum and British Humanists. It seems you can't go 2 minutes without having a trans flag thrust in your face these days. This week's events culminate on Transgender Day of Remembrance. On Monday, the 20th of November, trans activists across the world will honour and remember transgender individuals who have lost their lives due to anti-transgender violence and discrimination. It was started in 1999 by American male trans activist Gwendolyn Ann Smith, following the unsolved killing of trans woman Rita Hester in 1998. While there is nothing wrong with paying respects to those who have been killed, the problem with Transgender Day of Remembrance is that it gives the misleading impression that trans people in the UK are under constant threat. For instance, an Evening Standard article shared by Khan piously opined that the Transgender Day of Remembrance marks the memory of transgender people whose lives were lost in an act of transgender violence during the year. Thankfully, there were no confirmed examples from the past 12 months of anyone who has been murdered as a result of transphobic bigotry in the UK. One transgender teenager, they were just a confused child, right? Trans-identified teenager Brianna Gay was tragically killed in February. However, the full details surrounding the case, such as the motives of the suspects, have yet to be made public. And the child, there's no trans child, it was a confused child. Nevertheless, trans activists have gone to great efforts to stoke fear about a supposed wave of transphobic murders. One widely cited report titled Trans Murder Monitoring 2023 Global Update notes that from the 1st of October 2022 to 30th of September 2023, an estimated 320 people thought to be trans were murdered across the world. While every one of their untimely deaths is tragic and the victims will be mourned by their loved ones, this is not evidence of widespread transphobia. Nor, thankfully, are trans people being murdered disproportionately compared with the general population. If you dig deeper into these numbers, patterns emerge. The Trans Murder Monitoring Report states that almost half, 48%, of murdered trans people whose occupation is known were sex workers. It then goes on to note that almost 3/4 of all registered murders were committed in Latin America and the Caribbean. Nearly a third of those deaths occurred in Brazil. Were these murders fueled by transphobia? It's more likely that the trans sex workers are killed because the sex industry is notoriously dangerous and men who identify as trans are overrepresented within it. A long-term study of prostitution in the US showed that women who sell sex are 18 times more likely to be murdered than their peers in the general population. Finding specific statistics on the death rates from men who identify as women or who advertise services specifically as trans prostitutes is tricky. Suffice to say, prostitution is dangerous and often draws in those who are already on the margins of society. It goes without saying that these deaths are desperately sad, and yet these statistics have not prompted much international condemnation of exploitation within the Latin American sex industry. Instead, the deaths recorded by Trans Murder Monitoring are used to push the agenda of trans activists here in the UK and to try and shame and censor those who dissent against the erosion of women's sex-based rights. The problem persistently raised by the trans community in the UK are trivial compared with the suffering of sex workers at the hands of violent pimps and punters in South America. This mishmash is illustrated all too clearly by the Evening Standard article on Transgender Day of Remembrance, which advises readers that a simple way of showing your support is to acknowledge and use a person's preferred pronouns. Go and read it. Okay, so there's more to it. There's more to it, so go and read it. Joe always writes a good story, and this is no exception. It's insane, that we are saying. I mean, how many women is it killed a week in Britain by men? Three a week, I think. 3 a week. Yep. So this is nonsense, and it is exactly what it's a marketing tool. It's a branding exercise. That's exactly what it is. It's got nothing to do with anything else. They'll sit around looking pious in their gussets. It's got nothing to do with anything else. There you go. But let me know what you think in the comments, as usual. Please do. Great piece from Joe. Thank you very much for that, Joe. Subscribe, become a, I'll see you later. Bye.